Now we're on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. Ubedardurin, another kind of a cask. Afal pisha yayim mizalef alehem mutter. Oh boy, it says explicitly here that the wine is like flowing out of these casks or these, what do they call them? These baskets. Amalei, Sarav Kahana defends himself. He says, Hevi Kahamrit, that's a case of B'di'evet. What do we do with the grapes that were transported by the guy to the wine press B'di'evet post facto? I know L'chatchila kaimno. B'di'evet, we're not going to go as far as to say that we know that they touched the wine and they combined this wine with that wine. No, that far we're not going to go. But L'chatchila we should certainly prohibit. I don't know how this happened. Don't ask me. But an esrog fell into a barrel of wine. Idre ovekochavim. Okay, so idre means like he took the initiative, without even thinking about it. And shakle, he sort of like lunged in with his hand into the cask of wine in order to salvage the esrog. Amalu Rav Ashi, Nakuta Rabbi Yodei, Ki Hechi Dilo L'Shachlif Bei. The problem is like this. When the idolaters would do libations of wine, the main action was called shichshuch, which means to shake. He calls it to agitate. Okay, that's a very fancy English. I'm the amcha here. I'm just a regular guy. But to shake up the wine. So therefore, I want you to guarantee that when this idolater puts his hand into the cask of wine to get to obtain the esrog, make sure that he doesn't touch the wine. How do you know to guarantee that he won't touch the wine? He says, Nikuta Niktua liyade. When I read this, I mistakenly thought cut off his arm. But that's not what it means. It means take hold of his arm. Ubertsua ad deshaifa. Now, it's very nice that you hold on to his arm and you guarantee that he doesn't start doing shifshuf. Shichshuf, I'm sorry. But you haven't really solved your problem yet, says Rav Ashi. Because you know what? Let's say when he puts his hand into the casket, there is wine below his hand. When you now pour the casket out, so the upper wine that's above his hand will not come in contact with his hand. That's fine. But what about the lower wine below his hand? When he pours it off, it would seem that it might come in contact with his hand. And therefore, Rav Ashi insists that before they let his hand out, they should tip over the cask and pour out the wine. So in order to guarantee that he didn't touch the wine, you need two conditions to be fulfilled. Number one, you've got to like bind his hand so he doesn't start doing shifshuf. And number two, you want to make sure that he doesn't come in contact with any of the wine in the cask. So for that, you got to sort of tip over the wine barrel, pour off, so that anything that's left in the barrel is below his hand, and he's not going to be able to touch it. Amar Rav Ashi, Hi ove kochavim dinasche lechamer diso b'chavon. Whoa. We have a principle, Ein Adam Oser Davar Shani Shalom. Reuven cannot generate an Iser on that which belongs to Shimon. He's not the Bailam. Presumably, the same principle should apply to a guy. And if a guy comes along and he does a nisuch of Avoda Zara on the wine of Yisrael, we should apply the principle of Ein Adam Oser Davar Shein Shalom. So why does Rav Ashi insist that when the idol worshiper takes Jewish wine and he does a libation, then it generates an Isur of Avodah Zarah? So I don't see it here. So, with, we call it Eravon Mugbal, limited liability, I would say the following, that the Gemara back in the Mems, early Nuns, had established that there's a difference between an Akum who does an act on the object, in this case on the wine, and where he doesn't do a direct act on the object, on the wine. Here, because the Akum performed a nisuch, a libation with the Jewish wine, therefore that itself is a Maisa that has a totally different status. It's much more profound, and it generates an Isur even on what? On the wine of a Jew. However, Afal Gavdel is Vune Liovdi Kochamachrina Asur, Sharile Lemishkal Domea Meahu Ove Kochav. As we said at the outset, in Rav Ashi's scenario, the wine is the private property of the Jew. By virtue of the fact that the guy took that wine and made a libation with it, he has generated an Isur in the yayin. That's called mazik. Although I have to admit it's hezek she'edo nikar. I mean, you can look at the wine, send it to the lab, nothing has changed just because he did a libation. But nevertheless, the guy, at least in the laws of Bnei Noach, he has to pay for hezek she'edo nikar. And therefore, what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to collect compensation from the Akum. You might say, well, you're getting benefit from Yain Nesach. Yain Nesach is also about Noah. But the answer is no. You're not getting benefit from the Yain Nesach, says Rav Ashi. You're simply collecting Demei Nezek. He's paying you compensation for what he destroyed. My timer, Mikla Kaila. Mikla Kaila means literally to burn at the stake. He has taken your wine and burnt it up, meaning he's totally destroyed your wine. And therefore, he has to compensate you under laws of Nezikin. So the Jew is not benefiting by selling the wine to the guy. He's collecting money, b'toras Nezikin, from the guy. Omar Rav Ashi, I want to prove to you that I'm right. Tisanya from a brisa. If a guy pours a libation of Jewish wine and there's no idol over there, awesome. It doesn't matter. Since he had in mind, this no good idolater, that he is worshiping the idol wherever the idol is, that itself generates an Isur Avodas Kol Chavim. As we said before, because he's doing an action on the Jewish wine. I mean, it goes without saying that if it was in the presence of the idol, the same din would apply. Anyway. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Rabbi Yehuda ben Seir, matirin mishum shnei dvar. Okay, two great Tanoim were matir for two different reasons. Echad, one logic was ein menaschin yain el b'fnei avos chom. He held that there's no such thing as a guy who will do libations when the idol is absent. The Echad Omer Lo, and another reason why we could permit the wine is called Lo Kol Haminach Shetiyasa Yain Leonsi. Ein Adam Oser Davar Shein Shalom. And we only have an exception to that rule in the case of Shechita, for example, if a guy would slaughter a Jewish animal for the idol because he changes the idol. So it's not just a Maisa, like in our case, he did a Maisa Nisuch, but he did a Maisa that's so profound it changes the object. Now, before we go on, I think we have a few more minutes left. You'll tell me.
Yep.
I want to share with you a note that he has here. I don't know if you saw it already. He says, we do not accept fully the argument of Yehudim and Beseira, for the law is that a non-owner is able to render someone else's wine prudent for benefit by making it a libation, which is considered a maisa. Where the non-owner does not do a physical act with the item, let's say bows to an item, then we apply the principle of lo kol minach shetiyaser yayin leons. But if he performs a physical act with the item, for example, he slaughters someone else's animal for the idol, or, listen to this, he stirs someone's wine for libation, because as we said before, that's the way they did their nisuch, their libation, he does have the ability to render it prohibited. That's how we pass. Now, we're in a little bit of a bind over here because we said that the Jew has the right to accept payment for this wine, which was used as a libation by an idolater, because the idolater has caused him a nezek. But now we're saying, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Basra, ben Bava, or Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that the Akum did not generate an Isra on the Yayin, because lo kol minach tiaser yeni al yodcha.
Just tell.
What do you say?
Oh, no, sorry.
No, so all I'm trying to say is, that it's a little bit confusing here. I don't mean to confuse you or myself, but we have to keep in mind that we just established that the idol worship has to pay compensation to the Israel, but now we're saying that the idol worshiper can't even generate an Isra on the Israel, according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. But I think the answer is that although that's true for Jewish law, the guy doesn't have to know about that. The guy has to know that when he takes Jewish wine and he uses it as a libation, he's got to compensate the Jew for it. Okay, let's try to wrap this up. Hahi chavisa dechamra, a keg or cask of wine, the ishtakel lebarza. So the wine used to come out of something called a barza. We had this in Masechta Sukkah. And now the wine is flowing down because the spigot, this barza, fell out. Also because Chavim, immediately, without even thinking, the idol worshiper came, and Idre, as we said before, Idre means he took the initiative, the Anach Yodei Luye, so he tried to plug up the hole so that the wine wouldn't come out. Obviously, he's coming in contact with the wine. Omer Papa, Hol de Lahade Barza Chamra Osir. All the wine in the vicinity that's close to that barza is prohibited because that's where presumably he touched the wine. And here we turn to Daf Samach. Ve'idach shari, but the rest of the wine that's a little bit at a distance, then it's not really connected to the wine that he had contact with, and therefore it's mutter. Ika diari, but we have a second lishna. Omar of Papa ad habarza chamra osir ve'idach shari. The wine that's on the top, meaning the spigot is located, let's say, halfway in the vertical line of the barrel. So any wine that's above the spigot, which is now no longer there, that wine is prohibited. And the difference is as follows. According to Lishna Basra, the wine above the spigot is totally dependent on the spigot. If there's no spigot, it's going to fall right out. It's going to flow out through the hole. So therefore, it's considered like part and parcel of the spigot and any wine that's connected to the spigot. The wine below the spigot will continue to live in peace and harmony,
Right.
even in the absence of the spigot, because it's below that line. Maybe we'll just, if it's okay with you, we'll just add another few lines quickly. Omar of
Sure.
Yemar Kitanoi. Maybe this whole issue is a machlokes tanoi chavis shenikva. If the chavis has a hole in it, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Tanakam, is bein mipia, bein mishuleha, ubein mitzideha, v'nago bo tfuyom tmeh. So it doesn't matter. The wine on top of the hole, the wine on the bottom of the hole, the wine to the sides of the hole, all of this becomes tameh as a result of a tful yom. Like a tful yom means, let's say he was a Balkari and he has to wait until Hariv Shemesh, so he went to the mikveh already, but he's not tar until sunset, and his maga is metame. And I think he's metame kodshim. Just 1 second. Oh yeah, he's metame truma. But that truma has a secondary level of tuma, and it cannot be metame another truma. So if the tful yom came in contact with this truma, and here this other truma, only this truma becomes disqualified and tummy. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mipia mishalet me'er, mitzideh mikan mikan. On the top of the bottom of the cask, everything's tummy. Mitzideh tahora. Why is this so? According to Tanakama, when there's a hole on the side of the cask and one touches the wine in the hole, like at Tful Yom, for example, it's as if he touched all the wine in the cask. That's the Shita Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda maintains in contention that he is not deemed to be touching all the wine. And Rav Papa, who said that when the spigot fell out of the side of the cask, and an idolater plugged the hole with his hand, the wine in the cask proper remained permitted, that could only reflect the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, but not the Shita of Tanakh. Okay, then. So
Okay.
we'll stop
Shkoyach.
here and